Today we're going to be looking at the best performing ETFs of 2020, and a quick note, none of these ETFs are broad market ETFs that we're all used to like A200, VAS, VTS or even IVV. These are all different types of ETFs. Hey guys, my name is Fyzee and this channel is about finance and investing. Before we begin, as usual, this video is not financial advice. I'm not telling you to buy these best performing ETFs. Past performance does not equal future performance. It does not guarantee even the future performance, so make sure to do your own research as well. Let's get into it. Number 5 on the list, we have ASX IMPQ. This is the E-Invest Better Future Fund, and this is essentially a managed fund, which is an active ETF. So this basically means that fund managers are actively trying to buy and sell companies as they see fit based on their criteria and based on their research. And currently the ETF is holding around 46 companies. And the return for the ETF has been 70.9% for that year, which is just insane if you really think about it, because we're talking a whole fund generating such a high return, not just one company, but a whole fund, which is a pool of different companies. Now, the special thing about this ETF is the focus on ethical investing, sustainability, and this ETF only focuses on small to mid-cap companies rather than just tracking a normal index like some other ETFs do, which of course was one of the reasons which led to the overall outperformance, because fund managers carefully chose those investments. Now, ethical investing, when it comes to this, a lot of companies are going to essentially try and greenwash themselves and basically on the front end talk about how good they're doing when it comes to sustainability, and basically try to convince the public that what they're doing is ethical, it's green, it's sustainable, and it helps the environment. However, it might not be the case. It might just be an overall marketing strategy. Now, the thing about E-Invest is that they basically speak to these companies one-on-one, directly, even face-to-face, to ensure and basically ask them the tough questions to basically confirm that these companies are making the right choices. And that's how they essentially screen these companies when it comes to environmental, social, and governance factors, to really make sure that these guys, whatever they're doing, is helping the environment, which of course a lot of fund managers are not able to do this. So this is a huge plus. Now, let's talk about the fees for this ETF. So as you guys can see right here, since this is an actively managed ETF, the fee which you're going to be paying is going to be quite a lot. It's 0.99% per year, which basically means you're going to be paying 1% for your investment. So a $10,000 investment is going to cost you $99 per year, roughly. And if you compare this to most ethical ETFs, it is quite expensive, but it has to be done because this ETF is actively managed. So on top of that, they also charge a 20% fee for any outperformance. So basically, if they outperform the benchmark, whatever the outperformance is, they're basically going to charge that 20% fee. So this is basically an incentive for the fund managers to essentially outperform the index every time, so they can earn that bonus, which essentially means that you as the investor, you're getting the 80% cut out of that investment. So you're basically better off. But the downside to that is that if the fund manager is obviously not able to outperform the index, you still have to pay that 1% fee, which is going to be pretty costly. But judging by their past performance, which we probably shouldn't do, the returns have been pretty decent anyway, so do make your own decision and make sure to do some research as well. Now, fun fact, my friend and I actually had the pleasure of speaking with Jody from the E-Invest Investor Relations team. We basically just did a random Instagram live one day. It was a very casual chat and we talked about all things E-Invest, and we specifically spoke about the IMPQ ETF. We essentially asked her all the right questions, hopefully. We asked all the essential questions, and hopefully that live can answer some of the questions that you have as well for that ETF. So there should be a link in the description for that Instagram live, and make sure to follow me on Instagram as well. Now, also, I've done a full video on E-Invest as well. E-Invest also offers 4 other ETFs apart from IMPQ. There should be a link somewhere here. If you are interested in active management ETFs, do check out that video too. Moving on to the 4th ETF on the list, we have ASX FANG from E-Invest, and this ETF has performed 73% over 2020, which is just insane. So with FANG, essentially they give us exposure to highly traded next generation tech companies, right? So essentially tech leaders in the American space. Now with FANG, as we know, technology is the biggest sector in the US. It's essentially taking up around 20 to 30% of the overall US market. market. So of course that tech sector gives us as much innovation as possible, and ETFs like this give us that allocation that is often underrepresented in the Australian market, right? Because our Australian market only has less than 10% allocated towards IT. So if you want to get access to those American companies, this ETF is one way to do that. And the reason why this ETF is named FANG, because FANG is basically an acronym for Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, and Google. And this ETF essentially tracks those companies and a few other ones as well, which we'll have a look at in just a second. Now, one special feature about this ETF is that at the moment, it's literally only tracking 10 companies. So essentially those 10 companies have a weighting of roughly 10%. Some have less, some have more, but you can see that it's highly concentrated towards technology, which essentially adds to the risk because technology is often seen as being overvalued, especially in America. So if something was to happen, if valuations were to get disrupted or come down, this ETF can see lots of volatility. Because you have to keep in mind that lots of companies held in this ETF were companies that benefited so much from COVID and lockdown, right? Think about Netflix and Facebook. People were basically binge watching Netflix and they were on Facebook, social media, Amazon with the whole e-commerce thing, ordering online, Amazon Prime. So these companies benefited so much from lockdown, which of course drove the performance. So you can basically see why this ETF did so well. So looking at the holdings for the ETF, we can see that number one, we've got Twitter at about 11%, 10.87%. Then we have Apple, Nvidia, Netflix, Amazon, Facebook, and Tesla as well. Alphabet, which is Google, Baidu, and Alibaba as well. So literally only 10 companies, right? So these 10 companies have essentially given a massive return over that 2020 period, which is just insane. The management fees for the ETF are 0.35%, which means that you'll pay around $35 per 10K invested. And it's not too bad for the potential outperformance that you have. But of course, do keep in mind the risks as well. Now, fun fact, you can buy all ETF securities and e-invest ETF on a new brokerage platform called Perla, as you can see right here. As long as you buy these ETFs and you hold for more than a year, you will pay no brokerage. You only pay brokerage of $9.50 once you sell, which effectively makes the brokerage to be about $4.75 to buy and sell effectively. So it is quite cheap. It's chess sponsored as well. If you want to go check it out, there should be a link in bio, and you can use this code to also get a free investment credit, which means that you can make one additional trade completely brokerage free. So go check it out. It's an affiliate link as well. Third ETF we have on this list is ASX ATEC, and this has given a massive return of 81.6%, which is just once again crazy. I keep saying crazy, but these returns are pretty insane for just ETFs. So this is basically the Australian Technology ETF by BetaShares, and this essentially, as it says, invests in the leading Australian tech companies. Yes, we also have tech on the ASX, but as mentioned before, tech is often underrepresented on the Australian market, so this ETF is especially designed to give us exposure to that sector of the market. Looking at some of the holdings for the ETF, we've got Afterpay at a massive 20% weighting. We're talking 1/5, which is pretty insane. So if you're not a fan of Afterpay, you might not really like this ETF. We also have then Xero, which is an accounting platform, at about 12% allocation. If you're interested to invest in Xero, I've done a full video on them as well. There should be a link somewhere here, so go check that out. We also have Seek, REA Group, Car Sales, LTM, and some other familiar names as well. And it's really good to see these names because often when we talk about tech companies, we often refer to companies over in America like Apple, Amazon, Google. So it's really nice to see these names right here to kind of represent us on a global scale. Looking at the fees for the ETF, it is 0.48% per year, which is roughly going to cost you about $48 per $10,000 invested. So if you think about the fees as a percentage of the potential outperformance potential that you have, it may seem pretty minuscule and it may be worth paying the fees. Just make sure to kind of weigh up everything, because personally, I think it is worth it to invest in the sector. Now also guys, this was just a very high level overview of ATEC. If you want an in-depth video on ATEC, I've done a full video again on this as well. There should be a link somewhere here. There's lots of links, but trust me, it's all worth it. Go check it out. There should be a link in description as well. Now, the second highest performing ETF on this list is ASX KSM. This has given a 95% return, which means that it has nearly doubled in value over the year of 2020. This is basically the K2 Australia small cap fund, and this is once again an actively managed fund. And this is pretty similar to IMPQ, which is the first ETF that we had a look at, and this one also focuses on small to mid cap companies on the ASX. And guys, a reason why this ETF may be actively managed is because the small to mid cap place is a very risky place. There's lots of companies that are essentially going to go bust over the next 3 to 6 months, even the next month. So it is quite a risky place. Therefore, you need experienced fund managers to pick out the right investments to essentially outperform the overall index. And the good thing about this space is that although it is pretty risky, that is adjusted by the potential returns that you can get. And based on, as you guys can see with the figures of 95% over that year, you can see that it is quite a lucrative place. But once again, it is highly, highly risky. And personally, I don't play too much in this place as well. I would much rather buy into an ETF that does stuff like this where I can get exposure, and I try not to invest individually into companies in the small to mid cap space. Now, usually when it comes to actively managed ETFs, the stats that we see are most funds don't even outperform the overall benchmark. But looking at the historical return for this ETF, we can see that since inception, it's been returning about 10% per year, and that is after fees and costs. So it's better than what I imagined. Usually I would think that it would be less than 10% for sure. Now, with saying that, I'm not telling you to buy this ETF at all. That's just an observation that I just found. That's it. And you can really see that the performance has been very strong for the 1 year and the 2 year. We can see that it's been 58% for that 1 year. And of course, that's due to mostly COVID recoveries where stocks have essentially been recovering like crazy, especially in the small to mid cap place. Now, let's look into the fees for this ETF. And if you thought IMPQ's fees were a lot, this is probably going to give you a mini heart attack. I hope not. So the management fees are 1.31% per year. So that's just the fee that you're going to be paying no matter what. And then the outperformance fee is 15.38% per year. So compare that to IMPQ. The management fee that you're paying is 1% per year, whereas this one is 1.31. But the outperformance for IMPQ is 20% fee, whereas this one is 15.38. So that's just a quick comparison. But once again though, IMPQ has more of a focus towards ethical investments and ESG, so it may not be the right comparison to make here. Now, the last and final ETF on this list, which is the number one top performer of 2020, is ACDC. This ETF has returned 96% return over 2020. And this is basically the battery tech and lithium ETF. Now, this one I like quite a bit, and personally I've invested in this ETF as well, and I'll explain to you why I've done that. But once again, this is not financial advice, and the reason why I've done that is because essentially it's giving us exposure to energy storage and the production megatrend, which involves companies in the whole supply chain when it comes to lithium batteries, which means that this ETF is tracking companies from the actual raw material stage, from the mining stage, over to the manufacturing and sell stage, and then lastly the application stage where the end consumer purchases the product, like buying a smartphone which has a lithium battery, buying a Tesla car which has the lithium batteries inside it. So basically you can see that this ETF is tracking the whole mega trend as a whole industry from the whole supply chain. And the reason why this has been identified as a mega trend is because as the world starts to get much more greener, we're going to need more batteries, right? Smartphones are going to obviously need batteries. Batteries are starting to get more and more advanced, more and more better. Think back to the iPhone like 5 years ago, think about that battery life, and think about the current battery life, and think about with sustainable living and sustainability in automobiles, we're going to also see more and more electric cars, which of course need lithium batteries. So this has been identified as a mega trend. And also more and more people are starting to install home batteries as well. So we can really see the whole lithium trend going up as a result. But once again, guys, I always implore you to do your own research, and let's have a look at the fees, which is 0.69% per year, which means that you're going to be paying around $69 per $10,000 invested. Now, based on the outperformance, it may be worth paying the fees. Just make sure to do your own research as well. Now, personally, when I first heard about lithium and battery tech, I thought it was a pretty boring industry, and I was very kind of closed off to it. But once I learned about it, once I listened to a podcast on it as well, my mind was completely blown, and that's why I started to invest in it. But make sure to do your own research, and I've done a whole video on this ETF exactly, which goes into much more in depth about why this is a mega trend. And once again, there should be a link somewhere here as well, and there should be a link in description. That video should be pretty informative for you guys. So hopefully you guys learned that there is more to ETFs than just broad market ETFs like ASX 200 or the S&P 500. And if you're only investing into broad market ETFs like that, there's nothing wrong with that at all. But personally for me, I like to look at these other types of ETFs as well that have the potential to outperform the market, and personally it's very interesting to me. Now guys, just a quick disclaimer, just because these ETFs were the top performers of 2020, it does not mean that it's going to continue for 2021. This video was just to highlight some other ETFs that you may want to consider, and some other strategies as well when it comes to these thematic types of ETFs that track a specific trend. So guys, if you want to check out the ACDC ETF, you can check out this video, you can check out the ATech video right here, and you can check out the eInvest videos here as well. Lots of videos for you to watch if you're interested. And guys, thank you so much once again for watching. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye now. Now guys, if you